Welcome to Farm Here Daily, a field-forward podcast. I'm your host, David Geiger. Today on Farm Here Daily, we have a conversation with Don Roose, president of U.S. Commodities, about the marketplace and some of his latest travels, including a visit to the World Seed Bank. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast, as well as our social media channels at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Here Daily. And joining me on Farm Here Daily, we have President of U.S. Commodities, Don Roose, with us. Don, I always enjoyed talking to you about the marketplace and many other topics, and I definitely want to go over the marketplace here as well. But first, you had a trip to the Arctic, way up north. I want to go a little bit over that. What were you doing there, Don? And once again, thanks for joining us on Farm Here Daily. What were you doing up in the Arctic?
Yeah, glad to be back with you. Overall, about 6 years ago, traveled around the world for about 6 months, went to Africa, China, Australia, New Zealand, went to Antarctica, but to the other end of the pole, South Pole, but never did make it to the North Pole. So decided this time to complete the world tour would go to the North Pole. So got as close as we could up to the North Pole through the ice pack as far as we could go. And good trip. Not a lot of corn growing up there, but did go to where all the seeds for the world chaos, if that happens, are stored. And that's in a place north of Norway.
Wow, those were the guys who won the World Food Prize last year too. So that's pretty relevant.
Yeah, exactly. Slaughterbat is exactly where it was. So you're exactly right. And it was to put a little bit of color on it. They have now banned coal mining, and it's an old coal mine that was abandoned. And so that's where it is. Of course, it was modernized, but yep, that's the long and short of it.
And you got to visit. That's super cool.
Well, actually did not, a little more to the story, was not able to go into it. So
right. But you got to see it. You got to see the outside. That's still pretty, it's funny you said it's a coal mine, because in my head, when they were talking about it, I was full on imagining like this fortress in the mountains that just guard the world's seeds.
Exactly. I know it. So they kind of cheated and used it, but it did take quite a few $1 million to make sure it was far enough down and modernized.
Wow, that is amazing. That is so cool. Don, I'm glad you got that opportunity to go visit the Arctic and also check out the World Food Prize winner's location of the Seed Vault. But you are president of U.S. Commodities, and we talk a lot about the marketplace, or at least I have with you for many years now. And I want to take a look at just to this point, where we're at, and we can kind of go over some recent events, but to this point, how have the markets shaped up over the growing season? What's been your perspective, specifically in corn beans, as we've approached this season so far?
From a farmer standpoint, you never know what season you're going to get, David. And I think this one is one of those seasons, much like 1994, where it seems like, for the most part, there's problems in areas. But I would say, for the most part, this is a season that has been, let's just call it a special season, because it's one that it looks like the yields are going to be very large, historically large. And it's just because we've had an awful lot of water in good growing season. So I would call it probably a season that you don't get very often.
Absolutely. And then we had that USDA report saying we were going to have an absolutely bumper crop. And that is despite all the disease concerns that we've been worried about here at the early beginnings of August. But we're getting closer to the end of August than we are the beginning. What are we seeing? We have the Pro Farmer Crop Tour rolling around. What is the market really looking at right now?
Well, after we had we had a record crop on the corn, 188.1. I mean, that's just 4% over trend line yield. We did that in 2016, but that's a big number. So I think when you look at that, is it possible, like last year we had 183.4 on this report, and we ended up going under 180, closer to 179. So is this going to be a repeat where the government came out of the box too big, and from here on it gets smaller? And it is true that we've had an awful lot of water, and with a lot of water, you can get some disease problems. So I think that's going to be the key in the end, how big is big and how low is low. But pretty impressive that we pushed the corn market down sharply, and then we moved after the report and basically socked in a low since then.
We didn't have that low. What is kind of the general flow then as we move forward? We're watching those points specifically that you mentioned, but is there a note to make outside of that? Is it tariffs or is it world trade? I know the American Soybean Association is really pushing to have the trade issues with China resolved quickly as well.
Yeah, and I think that's it. We're talking about the supply side of the market, but to put it in perspective, after that crop report, the government put the corn production, new production, over 1 billion bushels. But then at the same time, they put the demand like 545 million bushels. So I think the real question on corn is, are we going to really have 100 million increase in ethanol, 200 million in ethanol or in exports, 200 million in feed? That's a real big jump. But your question specifically on soybeans, yeah, we need a Chinese deal because right now, China last year bought 54% of our total exports. That's actually just huge. And at the same time, this year so far, we've sold them zero soybeans, although the corn sales year to date are double what they were last year. So as we're going forward, what you're going to see is if China doesn't work a deal out or the U.S. a deal with China, our export window is going to close. We're usually selling for September, October, November, December, and a little bit of January. Well, looks like we've already lost the opportunity for September. So now we're working on October. Is Brazil going to fill that too? So like American Soybean Association is saying, we need a deal and soon.
With all of that concern, I'm still noticing that soybean prices are above that $10 mark when they were kind of flirting above and below that number for quite a bit of the summer. What has pushed folks to feel more confident that soybean prices are going to stay pretty strong right now?
Well, if you look at that's right. I mean, the soybean market actually just last week got within 28 cents of the high for the year, to put it in perspective. So the soybeans really haven't been able to break down. And one of the reasons they haven't been able to break down is because, yeah, we're worried about exports, but also the biofuels continue to be pretty strong. And that's a growth area, not only now, but in the future. So I think that's the look that we have going forward is, yeah, as we lose export competition, we build biofuel demand, aviation fuel, if you will, and some of the others, so biodiesel. So I think that's the reason soybeans have held together, more domestic demand, and even at the expense of our exports being slow, David.
This may be a bit of a tangent on that subject, but I'm kind of curious because I know sustainable aviation fuel was a big topic over the last year. So it's kind of slowed down a little bit right now. I'm sure there'll be plenty of conversations ahead, but was all of the talk of sustainable aviation fuels kind of moved into the market, especially in the claims of, billions of bushels of product of potential use in that industry market? Or is that still people are waiting before they start making that a market affected by the market?
Well, I think one, like you always say, if you will build it, they will come. And we've got an awful lot of facilities that are being built, that are anticipating. And I think there's going to be an awful lot of political pressure to go forward with a lot of those programs and come up with some programs that actually work and continue to support the biodiesel, the aviation fuel going forward, because that's really is our growth area. And I think you have to say we're probably going to continue to lose our export pace to Brazil, particularly now when China's getting very closer every day to the Brazil with a trading partner.
This is Farm Your Daily. We will have more conversations on the way, but first let's take a look at the marketplace. And grain saw a negative trade at the close. September corn 3.5 cents lower, 379.5. December falling 3 1/4, 403 1/4. Soybeans in September 7 3/4 down, 10.13, with November 7.5 cents weaker, 10.33 3/4. Soybean meal in September, though, did see a $7 a ton increase, $287.40, Wheat in September, though, down 4 1/4, 498.5, with December falling 3 3/4, 521 1/4. In the livestock market close for Tuesday, October live cattle up 17 cents a hundredweight, 231.35. December falling 2 cents, 233.25. Feeder cattle in September $1.50 a hundredweight higher, 352.42, with October rising $2.05 at $352.30. Lean hogs in October 2 cents a hundredweight higher, $90.15, with December falling 47 cents at $82.97 a hundredweight. That is the Tuesday market close. This is Farm Year Daily. All right, Don, I want to swap over to livestock for a moment because that marketplace has been pretty wild over the last year, especially cattle. It just seems to be going up and up, but then there will be random days where it'll go limit down or double limit down in some cases. What is going on in the marketplace there? Why are we seeing these huge highs and then these big lows?
Well, the doubters on the market that this is the historical bull market continue to try to press the market and then come back out of it. But the real guiding light, David, is the fact that the numbers are tight, the demand is strong. It's a cash-led bull market. So by that, I mean it's the cash market that's staying firm, and the futures are just plain running too big of a discount because it's anticipating the market's going to go down. Nobody anticipated that demand would be this strong. We're basically $50 a hundredweight, 25% higher than we were a year ago on cash cattle. And the demand now, I think this is the key, is historically cash cattle and the futures always top out when the packer gets the advantage. Last week, we didn't sell any cattle in Texas in the open market. In other words, the packer had forward bought, used as captive cattle. That's a warning sign. Boxed beef now has moved up to over $408. That was only eclipsed once for a very short time during the pandemic. So what I'm saying is the packers moved the beef up high enough. And I think what he's saying is, listen, the cattle numbers aren't there. We moved our from about a $250 head loss on killing cattle to about a $50 head profit. And we're gonna go to work and back cattle up. We don't have to buy them. We'll make the price high enough so we slow the demand down, and that's how they're going to balance it. So that's usually the warning sign, David.
I think too of the hog market, and I know in the marketplace, a smaller amount, especially than cattle, is actually traded by farmers. But it is an interesting aspect of how that price works because, as far as I understand, there really hasn't been a huge change in the hog inventory, while the cattle inventory has shrunk. But the hog prices have been kind of drug up a bit, have they?
Yeah, that's what's happened. I mean, it's the cattle market's really pushed the hog market up. The other thing we had is a lot of disease problems in the hogs. And, I think that's getting behind us. I think that's why the numbers were down in the summer. But now we're building back the herd. And finishing units are hard to come by in the Midwest. So that's an issue. At the same time, China is in the process because their profitability is poor, much like ours was in the hog industry here for the last several months. They're liquidating up to a million sows. Just think of that. So that might also be a source where our meal demand turns out to be less down the road, David.
Don, shifting gears one more time, I do want to take a look at the outside trade. And have there been major impacts there? Or are you watching for major impacts in, say, the U.S. dollar? That's gone up, I think, about 2 points or so over the last 6 months. It was down, I think, at 96, and now it's around 98. What about energies? Is there anything in particular to watch for in the outside markets?
Well, agriculture is very capital intensive. So I think the one big thing we're watching is the interest rates. And one of the reasons that the dollar was strong, it was up to like 110, 112. Now it's under 100, like you say, 97 or so. And one of the reasons is because interest rates were high. Well, if interest rates come down, I think probably the dollar comes down. If the dollar comes down, that probably helps the export demand, and it helps our budget being balanced. But so I think we're watching that. Meantime, you're talking crude oil. it looks like if Russia-Ukraine gets a deal, it looks like there's going to be more grain that's going to move into the market. It looks like crude oil probably stays under pressure as the world produces more crude oil and Russia sells it easier in the world market. So that's a pressure. And meantime, you look at the metals, and I mean, they've just been on fire, gold and silver. And I think that's because the confidence in inflation that we've got it under control is not really satisfactory. So I think those are all the issues that we have.
Don Roose is president of U.S. Commodities here in the Des Moines area. Don, really appreciate your time and analysis on Farm Here Daily. If there are folks who are listening in, interested in getting a hold of you or your team, do you guys have a good number to give a call to?
Yeah, you bet. And we do have a marketing team and a risk management team. I've been at it for over 46 years, so we think we have some knowledge behind us from that standpoint. But yeah, feel free to reach at us at 515-222-1393 or look at what we do on uscommodities.com.
uscommodities.com. Don Roose, thank you so much for joining us on Farm Here Daily.
Glad to be back with you. Thank you, David.
This is Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast as well as our social media channels at Field Forward Pod. You can also find me on social media at Geiger Reports, as well as WHO TV Channel 13 every weekday in their morning and noon hour programs. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.